Hi, this is Sierra Coleman, licensed therapist, checking in with other clinicians to give them some information about how we handle divorce proceedings and custody issues. We'll also go over, like I said, divorce issues, custody issues, excuse me. We'll also discuss legal and ethical implications regard to the clinician, and also the possibility that we may have to be summoned to court to testify. Uh, so basically, we'll just start with the divorce. Okay, so depending on the divorce, we want to talk about where we would get our clients from. So there's a couple options. If we were seeing a couple who decided to get divorced, that's one area that we would be involved with the case, possibly. The second one is that if there was court mandated therapy, that might be a person that was referred to you via that therapier. Also, there might be a situation where if you are credentialed as a mediator, that the court could have you on a list and also involve you in proceedings for a dissolving of a marriage. Okay, so we'll just go with the standard thing is that maybe you are a clinician to a couple that has decided that they no longer want to be together. So eventually, excuse me, so initially, we know as clinicians that it is not our duty to make a couple stay together. So a couple might not come to therapy and decide to stay together. They might come to therapy and at the end of their sessions decide that they don't want to be together. Well, that's also something that is quite often. We just want to help them get to wherever they need to get to decide what's best for them individually and also as a family. So say for instance you've been seeing a couple for a couple months and they've decided that divorce is the next step that they should take. I would automatically advise each person in the couple that they need to seek an attorney. I really strongly advise against people representing themselves. It's a really stressful situation, and also it puts you at a disadvantage because if you're not a divorce attorney or a family law attorney, I would really discourage my client to do that. So I definitely, even if the client is a lawyer, I still think that it's best that they seek an outside counsel. So they've gotten their attorneys. They file legal separation. So the legal separation basically says that we've decided that we want to dissolve our marriage, but you have to have a legal separation. The time period depends on whatever state that you're in. And during that legal separation, also it would state like the reason why you would want a divorce. So the most common is irreconcilable differences. There's sometimes it'll be adultery, sometimes it'll be that unfortunately there's some abuse and it's just not a relationship that should continue, or some child rearing issues. It just depends on the couple. So depending on that, the judge may say, hey, I think that you should go to therapy or go back to therapy. And if that's something that the judge decides that he would like or she would like them to see, then the clients will come back to therapy. During that amount of session that they were granted through the court, then they might decide, okay, we might get back together. Great. If not, okay, we still will move forward. In that process, we go back to court. Divorces the timing of when a divorce occurs basically depends on how long or how much that the family has to dissolve. So it might be some businesses, it might be real estate, and then there might be the next issue, which is custody. There's the children involved. Okay, so there might be a couple things depending on what kind of relationship it is. You might have a family that goes, okay, joint custody, we're gonna work and we're gonna co-parent, we don't want to have issues. You might have a really volatile relationship where I don't want him seeing the kid at all, and the accusations might come out. And so here's a couple things for that. So if the couple decides, okay, in regards to custody, there's two kinds. There's physical and legal custody. So if there's physical custody, it basically says that this parent is the sole person that the child lives with from mostly day to day, and that's who the child's going to reside with, and then the other parent is going to get delegated days. The legal custody also would be is that the parents would decide that I am the person that makes all legal decisions decisions and medical decisions for the child. In a situation where parents have decided that they would like joint custody, then that same situation applies, but it would, the opportunity and the responsibility would be split amongst each parent. They would decide what holidays is spent with what. In a really good future blended family situation, then the children might spend the holiday with both parents being there, and maybe new spouses. In situations where there is an issue, where there is like accusations of abuse, I think then it gets a little bit more difficult, because then we might have to go back to court, or the family might go back to court, and these allegations have to be investigated. A lot of the times, depending on the allegations, DCFS might be involved, and that's where an investigation takes place. There is where we begin to talk about legal and ethical things that we really have to focus on. So legally and ethically, we are mandated to report. So we're mandated to report any accusations of abuse if we are seeing the child. I really strongly advise against you seeing both parents individually, because then there becomes an ethical issue as well. You can't be both clients individuals therapists. You can be the couples therapist and the family therapist, but there under no circumstances could you be the individual therapist. Now, if you see the clients individually, depending on the sessions, you have to come back and report what the other person says. So I think that it's important that you refer them to an individual therapist as well, if you're just the therapist for the couple or the family. Again, remember, we are legally mandated to report any signs or any accusations of abuse to DCFS. So that also covers us in confidentiality. So sometimes we might be summoned to court. So if we are summoned to court, there are some things that we can report. We can report the things in regards to abuse. Anything outside of that, it breaks confidentiality and we can be sued. And that's why we have malpractice insurance. But we want to make sure that we are doing our duty as clinicians ethically, but we also are doing our duties to protect our clients and their confidentiality. Everything is not open for discussion. That is why therapy is a private situation, and it's a place that people are able to open up and say and do the things that they need to do to get where they need to go. So if there is a situation where abuse is reported, you might be mandated by the court to provide, some therapy. So you might be providing some trauma-focused therapy for the child as well. And then we have to report our findings. And we want to make sure that we cover ourselves every time where we document very concisely what we saw and what we did with the child. There might be times where there might be some videos of the session. We want to make sure that we have all of the okay from the parent in regards to the legal part of it. But we also want to make sure that we're protecting the child if we're seeing the child in regards to the abuse accusation. And we want to make sure that we are trained to do things like that. So if you're not a person that's trained to provide trauma-focused therapy or some kind of counseling like that for the children who've been victims of sexual or physical abuse, then we want to make sure that we don't do that as well, because that also puts us in a situation to have some litigation issues. So after we've covered some of the small parts of the divorce, we want to make sure that the couple leaves the therapy room feeling like that they have gotten what they needed to decide whether they're going to be divorced, if they're going to stay together. And we also want to make sure that if we are summoned to court, that we are ready in regards to documentation and also to therapeutic knowledge to basically give our findings, or to report or to conceptualize what we saw with the clients or the children. And the children are clients too. Again, this topic is difficult, but this is also part of what we do. We work with couples and we work with families, and sometimes families and couples decide to break up. And we have to basically advocate for our clients and also make sure that they are comfortable with the process. And we also should need to get comfortable with having these conversations with clients. I think that in order to cover ourselves, we also need to have some binding contracts, like saying, I will not discuss blase unless it is something that I am court mandated to report. We also need to be very clear in the beginning of clinical work that we discuss what we are bound to do, what we are willing to do, and what we are not. That protects us as well, and it gives the client a sure amount of information of what we are qualified and what we are willing to do, so there will be no misunderstandings about what we are willing to do. If you always feel unsure, if you are unaware of what actions you should take, you should always seek the code of ethics to help you, and it's always on the website of AAMFT. Excuse me. There's also I would get real educated on your state that you're licensed in, what the court proceedings process is for divorce and custody battles, because you want to be up on all the information in regards to the clinical aspect, but also the legal aspect, because we sometimes end up interchanging both of those avenues. So again, this is Sierra Coleman, and I was just here to give you a couple little tidbit of information on some real concise information on how to handle divorce and how to handle disputes with custody. If there's any more questions, you can send me an email. Thank you.